Amena Bakr, Senior Research Analyst at Energy Intelligence. Picking up on James' point there, what's the something else that's going to happen, Amena? You were quite cryptic in your posting on Twitter or X the last few days that pay attention that June 1st isn't the day in which OPEC Plus has to decide on its cuts because the big cuts are unilateral and Saudi Arabia might choose to do them at a different time. As you sat on the stage with the Saudi oil minister very recently, did he slip that piece of information to you? What's the latest in that message you're giving the market?
No, it's not cryptic at all, Sean. It's quite obvious. I mean, we all know it's public knowledge that the cuts that we're talking about that could possibly be unwound or under the current agreement expire by the second half of the second quarter. These are voluntary cuts. These are cuts imposed by 8 members of OPEC Plus. This is not a production cut imposed by the entire group. Therefore, those cuts or anything related to those cuts is just a phone call away within, and the decision needs to be made within those members. They don't have to go to Vienna on June 1st and decide. They could either make the decision about it before or after. It doesn't have to be on June 1st because I feel like
obviously it doesn't have to be. I mean, it could be tonight, but the point is that usually these things happen in synchronization. A meeting of this scale not to proceed with that announcement would be quite, it could be that event that James just referred to. If they all went to Vienna and there was no mention of those cuts that Saudi Arabia and others are shepherding, that could be quite a significant market event.
No, I feel like traders are assuming too much, Sean, not understanding that, I mean, this decision doesn't necessarily this is not the deadline for them to make that decision on June 1st. They need to realize that. So if they go into the meeting, I mean, it's still unclear if the meeting so far, they say it's in Vienna, maybe it's going to be a virtual meeting. So if they don't end up making that decision and make the decision, for example, on June 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 5th, I mean, they can decide to do that. It's not the cutoff date. There is a kind of impression that traders are trying to suppress prices until that decision is made. So that's the kind of, idea that's floating around, and just putting it out there that the decision doesn't necessarily have to happen on the day of the OPEC meeting because it doesn't concern all of the members. For the time being, Sean, everybody thinks that everyone in the market is baking in the fact that they will be extending these cuts further. There's a need to extend to the cuts because I agree with Dr. Carroll that there are uncertainties around where demand is going. We're seeing prices still very shaky, so they might need to extend those cuts further. Let's see what they do in the end.
We've had some sort of mixed messages recently from the Biden administration about their management of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Some indications that they might use it if prices were to get too high, like they did 2 years ago ahead of the midterm elections, or the other reports that they might be buying to replenish it. The commentary from Amos Hochstein was that there's lots of, even though they might be buying, there's still lots of storage there that they could call upon if necessary. How do you think that would be reacted to by OPEC? Could that impact OPEC Plus decision and supply policy for the second half?
Obviously, OPEC Plus, Sean, doesn't like it when the U.S. announces SPR to manage the price. I mean, this SPR in the first place is there to use in case of an emergency or a huge outage in supply. We don't have that. That's not the case. So if they're going to be using it to suppress prices, then, I mean, we saw that policy. It's kind of a failed policy. It didn't really work to do that, and we're at a level now where U.S. stocks are at a 4-decade low. In theory, yes, yeah, they would need to replenish those supplies in order to release them at a later date. But even though, I mean, I think it was yesterday or earlier this week, they announced that they would buy at 79.99. That's the price. So they've kind of set a floor there for where they're comfortable buying. But the volumes we have so far are really small. It's 3 million barrels or 3.3 million barrels. So it's quite a small volume for May. Yeah, to wrap it up, OPEC doesn't like it when the US uses its stocks to impact prices, but it's an election year. So if these prices do get higher, we might get that kind of reaction from the US.
Amena, I wanted to get your thoughts and insight on the article that you guys published yesterday, Energy Intelligence. It's not your story, Simon Martelli. I would imagine, though, that you have an insight on it, given your expertise. That basically the headline is "Touch Baseline Talks Loom for OPEC Plus." We're looking towards the end of the year when the baseline, the quotas, whether not the voluntary ones, but the quotas in which all countries operate, are up for consideration, and that this may be a more difficult conversation as that's not so far away now. And obviously you've published a story thinking obviously it's near enough to be of matter. Where do you think that conversation goes in the coming months?
Sure. Well, we published that story now because the 3 independent companies have been reaching out to all the states concerned and are currently revising or reviewing where their capacities are at. So that process is taking place now and should end by the end of June. Numbers should be submitted, but the group have until December to decide what the new baselines will be. And this will reflect better what capacities each country has, and you won't get a mismatch where some countries are not able to meet their quotas. We know that some countries have been increasing their capacity, like the UAE. Sean, that they've recently updated the capacity on their website, which is now 4.85 million barrels a day. Industry sources that we've spoken to so far are doubting that it's at that level. That remains to be seen, and remains what kind of evidence the UAE could show to the independent sources that they could actually reach that capacity, and it's sustainable capacity. But that conversation is always a tricky one. We've seen countries leave OPEC because of it. We had Angola last year. I mean, many countries, even though they can't reach a certain level of production, on paper they would still want a capacity or a baseline that is higher than reality, that kind of guarantees them a certain share of the market. So usually when you talk about capacity review or baseline review at OPEC, it's kind of a can of worms, and that's why they try to avoid the subject for a long time. But I think now they really need to reassess, because we do have discrepancies between what countries are able to produce versus what's on paper.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, what's happening, as you referenced early in your early part of your comment there, was that Woodmac, Rystad, and S&P Global are doing a review of every country's current production capacity. That is a commissioned request from OPEC, as I understand it. Is that OPEC Plus or OPEC? OPEC Plus.
OPEC Plus.
OPEC Plus. And those reports for those 3 companies are due by the end of June. Will they be made public? Do you know?
It's not clear. I mean, we did get kind of indications last year when they did reviews for some of the African states. You do hear numbers coming up that wasn't officially announced or anything. I mean, the official announcement comes after an agreement is taken, and then OPEC or the Secretariat would publish those numbers.
Just again, in the first sentence of this article, which I encourage everybody to read, Energy Intelligence puts out there that there is some pressure within the group to start unraveling the 2.2 million barrels a day of voluntary measures by 8 member countries. I just wanted to understand from you, what that means there's some pressure within the group to start unraveling these cuts?
Some countries within the ones that offered the voluntary cuts would like to see more of their supply come into the market. I mean, we already saw that, for example, Iraq, there's some overproduction from Russia, some overproduction from Kazakhstan, and they've offered the compensation cuts as a kind of, to stay aligned with their quota. So that's going on. But the more, I mean, cuts are not easy to maintain, Sean. So there is some pressure from some of these countries to start releasing additional supply to the market.